There have been some truly out there and bizarre designs over the years, from Atari to Sega to Nintendo, and not just from back in the day, either. Recent systems have come out with controllers that have not necessarily reinvented the wheel, but dramatically changed its shape. Today we take a look at 10 of the weirdest video game controllers. While the Sega Saturn 3D control pad was ahead of its time with its analog stick, its form factor made it a bit of an oddity. A circular controller with plenty of unused space, it resembles a spacecraft more than a video game controller. The analog stick on the left side controls movement, while triggers on the back can be used to control the environment. The Sega Saturn was the precursor to the Dreamcast, for which Sega retained the circular shape for its controller. The Nintendo Wii Remote, or Wiimote, completely flipped the notion of what a game controller was on its head. With this white cuboid that could be swung to throw a digital bowling ball or tennis racket, playing games suddenly became a more active activity. A and B are on opposite sides. There are buttons with 1, 2, plus, and on them, and you attach something to it called a nunchuck, which is where the analog stick is. It's a controller that wouldn't work on any other console than the Wii. The Dreamcast controller is unique in that it had a detachable memory card with a LCD screen, called a VMU, Visual Memory Unit, connected directly to the controller. Due to its limitations, however, it wasn't utilized very often, as developers didn't really know how to integrate it into games. It was a novel idea at the time, but in practice, it didn't amount to much. The VMU makes for an interesting and strange-looking controller, and that's not even counting the shape of the pad itself. The controller for the Amiga CD32, with its odd shape and large, colorful buttons, looks somewhat like a young child's toy that was accidentally manufactured upside down. If you hadn't used one before, it would be hard to know just how to go about holding the thing. It was released in September of 1993, but looks like it came from a time long before that, especially considering the Super Nintendo and its iconic controller were 3 years old at that point. Unsurprisingly, this controller didn't connect with players. Not the most pleasing gaming device to the eyes, the N64 controller resembles the foot of a chicken. The three-pronged design makes it difficult to know where to put your hands, and means that a third of the controller is perpetually inaccessible. The controller for the Sony PlayStation, coming from the same console generation, is much simpler and easier to use in comparison, which is likely why Sony continues to use the same basic design to this day. On this occasion, Nintendo's attempt at innovation resulted in something oddly shaped and awkward to use. The Atari Jaguar controller looks more like an answering machine than a video game controller, with a keypad in the middle, where your thumbs would naturally fall, and a D-pad and 3 big red buttons at the top. It looks more like 2 different controllers were squished together rather than one cohesive unit that was designed with users in mind. The standard controller has 17 buttons, not including the D-pad, but as if that wasn't enough, a redesigned controller added 3 face buttons and 2 shoulder triggers. What sounds like a cool and exciting periphery, the NES Power Glove, released in 1989, is actually very cumbersome and awkward to use. The marketing for the Power Glove made it look like a revolutionary piece of tech, but what the creators failed to take into account was the fact that in order to play games, players would be having to keep their arm raised pretty much the whole time. This is one of Nintendo's ideas that probably seemed like a better idea in practice than in reality. The Philips CDI touchpad controller looks very similar to the Super Nintendo controller, but for one glaring aspect, the left side is inverted. It seems like a blatant attempt to differentiate it from its Nintendo counterpart because if it didn't, it would look almost identical. The result is something that looks like a mistake made in the factory, but no, all CDI touchpads were purposely designed this way. To make it look even weirder, a joystick could be inserted into the center of the D-pad. With D-pads on either side, the Nintendo Virtual Boy controller is liable to confuse your brain when faced with it. This design choice was intended to allow the player to control elements in 3D environments, but it doesn't quite work the same with D-pads as it does analog sticks. It somewhat resembles the GameCube and N64 controllers, but with its grips that look twice as long as they need to be, this is by far the weirdest of the three. Looking more like an inflatable neck pillow than a video game controller, the Intel Wireless Series gamepad has to be one of, if not the weirdest controllers to ever actually come into existence. As weird as it looks, it was released in 1999, when wireless controllers were still years away for the big hitters like Sony and Nintendo. At least if you want to take it somewhere and don't have any room left in your bag, you can just wrap it around your neck.